Recording. Okay, so for people that will be not so lucky like us to participate to this inspiring and great symposium, and thank you to the attendees. We are going to start this virtual session entitled Socio-Political Issues for Community Psychology. It's a great pleasure to have you here. And as we were saying before, to have more than 3 continents together. Someone like Nicholas from Australia and Mary Lutz from Puerto Rico, Jung, Ling and Meg from US, I suppose. So it's a little record, but that makes us really happy and really honored to have the opportunity to share you. Of course, Daniel from Israel, and I see also Dora and Vic and Valerie for the moment, but we are waiting also other participants. And so we are the virtual side of this conference, this Global World Conference of Community Psychology. And we have this really precious opportunity to share so different experiences from very different countries, societies, but with the same language and hopefully with the same goals. So to promote and to share our knowledge, each other, and maybe to find also some reasons to collaborate in the future, but at least to enrich ourselves now. So thank you again for being here. If you agree, I would suggest that since we are going to have 6 presentations in 1 hour and a half, to try, no, it's not mandatory, to present your talks in 8, 9, 10 minutes maximum, so to have at least 5 minutes for some questions. And of course, I would pray you to try to use the chat and also to recognize the chat, because it would be great to have some questions, if you have them, also during the talks, so that I could be able to organize them and to propose them to the speaker together at the end of the presentation. But of course, it's a place also for you to talk each other. This symposium sometimes are quite populated, but not so much. So new technologies make possible something that usually during standard in-present symposium is not possible. So to talk each other during a presentation. Of course, always watching and listening to the presentation, but I think that in the future, this kind of environment, of course, these environments are grabbing or stealing us the opportunity to meet in person, to embrace, to hug each other, but will give something else, probably not compensating at all the respect, but they would allow us to be multitasking a little, and probably someone will invent the way to exploit for real this great potential. But we are here to talk about community psychology and community sociology, and not just new technologies. So it's a great pleasure to have again Daniel with us. And Daniel, if you are okay, we have also your video. Let me know if you want to present yourself the video, if we have to. But in general, Daniel is coming from the Department of Social Work from the Hadassah Academic College in Israel, and is going to present a talk entitled opportunities and challenges in social connectedness between a Palestinian Bedouin and an Israel Jew. And thank you, Daniel. When you want, you can start.
Okay, thank you so much, Andrea. And it's great to be here with all the people from around the world. The study I will be sharing was actually performed at the Professional School of Psychology in Sacramento. But since I continued working on it at the Hadassah Academic College, where I work now. I will be showing a video. The video is only 7 minutes. You may need to turn up the sound a bit because the sound is not, perhaps it's not so good. I'll show the video.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Daniel Weiswood from Hadassah Academic College, and we'll be talking about opportunities and challenges in social connectedness between a Palestinian Bedouin and an Israeli Jew. Social connectedness is essential in human development, and one of the ways to establish this is through friendship. In an era of globalization, intercultural encounters are rising, and thus the possibility for intercultural social connectedness and friendship increases. Social connectedness provides excellent opportunities for bringing more understanding between people of different cultural communities and for personal growth, despite their habitually frustrating challenges. Here in the picture, you see my friend Ahmad, a Palestinian Bedouin, and myself, a Jewish Israeli of Dutch origin, in Amsterdam. This ethnography focuses on the interface between interculturality and friendship. It does so in the context of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, an environment that is not conducive to social connectedness between Arabs and Jews. I investigated our friendships through the lens of real-life stories of friendship collected over 3 years. After working through the texts of these stories with Ahmed, my friend, I analyzed them from the theoretical perspective of Hofstede's initial 4 cultural dimensions. 4 cultural dimensions of Hofstede are the following: individualism versus collectivism, uncertainty avoidance, which is the degree to which members of a society will feel uncomfortable with uncertainty and ambiguity, masculinity versus femininity, and power. And expect power to be divided and equal. Hofstede had 2 more dimensions, which were not included in this study. The study showed that respective cultures in which we grew up are very different on each of these dimensions. And the differences as they appear in friendship are tremendous. These differences are in line with Hofstede's theory for 3 of the cultural dimensions, not in the field of uncertainty avoidance, they were the opposite of the theory. To remain connected as friends, we need to bridge these differences, which involve emotional, cognitive, and behavioral challenges. Nonetheless, the friendship flourished despite social pressures, but the study became an integral and increasingly significant part of the friendship. Culture is a set of shared attitudes, values, goals, and practices that characterizes a group. We are shaped by our culture from birth. We judge others by the standards of our culture, and we see the world through the perspective of our culture. But the way we are shaped can also become a social cultural prism. When we look at the world from our social cultural perspective and either do not see or devaluate other perspectives. And this is a challenge. 2 people meet and each is imprisoned in her or his social cultural perspective. We are likely to encounter misunderstanding and tension. And more so when the relationship is close. Especially in a friendship, we expect the other to understand our point of view, the greater the social cultural gap, the higher the chance that this will go wrong. For years, Ahmed and I frequently felt misunderstood, devaluated, or ignored, causing ongoing frustration. This concerned a variety of issues, such as time and availability, privacy, and social obligations, among others. We look at the same situation and see things differently. Let me give you an example of the challenges in social connectedness. A friend of us posted this picture on Facebook. What I saw was 16 with a camera. Ahmed's was a beautiful sunset with a camera. In fact, that's what he wanted to write in the comments below the picture. I told him, you cannot do that. You cannot just ignore your friend. This was a very judgmental remark. And only later I realized that I was the one who was wrong, posing my perspective, my social cultural view. Over the years, the friendship evolved in a much broader form of social connectedness. Despite the enormous differences, his friends and family became my friends and family. To some extent, the other way around. Moreover, his cats and dogs became my animals as well. Thus, a great network was created, supporting mine and his well-being. Social connectedness also creates opportunity for transformative learning. For me, part of this learning had to do with political views. Though we never spoke politics as such, realizing how life looked from the side of the oppressed provided me with a whole new perspective of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. In general terms, through social contact with someone from a marginalized group, one learns about life from the other side. The conclusion of this study is that social connectedness, namely friendship, and especially friendship with someone from a socially disadvantaged group, is a major opportunity for transformative learning, in the sense that it broadens our horizon and creates an escape from the social cultural prison. It's the ongoing Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The friendship between an Israeli Jew and a Palestinian Bedouin is a rare phenomenon. There was much pressure on both of us to resolve the relationship. However, the struggle only made it become stronger. With time, we became an example in the midst of hatred, showed that one can be socially connected and trust divine. This brings us to the end of this lecture on opportunities and challenges in social connectedness between a Palestinian Bedouin and an Israeli Jew. I hope you enjoyed it.
Here we are. Great. Actually, I liked very much this presentation. Congratulations, Daniel. Of course, I liked all the presentation, but some of them are really, I think, fascinating. Please, Nicholas, if you want to make a question.
Yeah, I mean, I was clapping, but it's also a question that I have. I mean, thank you for the video and the presentation. It was really, really interesting. I was wondering in terms of social connectedness, and particularly I was wondering in the case, of your friendship and your social relation with Ahmad. I was thinking, like, what do you think are, like, let's say, like, conditions that enable to have like a social connection that develops into a friendship that allows transforming or horizons. Yeah, if you could, I don't know if you have some reflections on that, on what conditions can enable or facilitate that process.
Yeah, I think one thing, and that took a lot of time for me to understand, is that not assume that you're right. I mean, there are other perspectives. Now, for a community psychologist, that must be clear, but still, like as a person, as an individual, it's it's really hard to realize that the other person can see things completely different. That's one thing. And the other thing is flexibility, like trying to adapt and to combine like different ways of seeing things.
Oh, Dora wrote, I like the idea of escaping the sociocultural prison. Which changes stand out in your life after prison?
Actually, thank you for both questions. Actually, it really changed my life in many ways. Even with, I'm a clinical psychologist, and even with my clients, I'm much more open to other ways of thinking and seeing the world. For example, I do things in a much more collective way. I was educated, raised in a very individualistic culture in the Netherlands, and now I'm trying to be much more collectivist, like joining together, something which is a big change for me. I am able to be less organized. I used to be someone, everything was very clear, like on my desk. If my desk wasn't clean, and I wasn't able to work. And through being friends with a Bedouin, I can work wherever, like with big heaps of all kind of rubbish. So it's in all kind of levels that I changed.
Great. Actually, I should move to the next talk, but I want to make a question, actually, because I really, I had inspired, your talk inspired me. And just a very brief answer to these thoughts. What do you think about the fact that cultural differences can be a risk, but at the same time, a promoting factor for this transformative learning opportunity? You know, am I correct if I think that cultural differences are both at the same time both a dark side, but also a bright side for this process, for the transformative learning?
I see it much more on the bright side, but I don't think I'm in the majority. Like for many people, it's like, you don't think like I do, so you are wrong.
Yeah. The
But,
obstacle beats.
Right. There is, but I must say that also for me, there sometimes is a difficulty, like with saying, wait, I could look at this from different perspectives. That makes things more difficult. It's much easier to see things just in one way. And if there are more perspectives, and you may be more flexible, but still you need to think, okay, so how am I going to cope with this?
Yeah, you're right.
Thank you, Andrea.
No, you're welcome. Even if I think that maybe a very challenging issue for community psychology would be to find some ways to transform the cultural differences in a richness, in an enriching factor, instead of just an obstacle for communication. But of course, it's not easy. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't be here.
Like, I need to add one more thing. Like, here we are very many people like together, and there's a feeling like of abundancy. But at least where I live, like, I really am in a minority. I mean, people don't think like this, don't think like we need to work together and so on.
In Italy as well, unfortunately. So at least. Thank you again, Daniel, and also for being quite short. And we can go to the next, pass to the next presentation from Yunling Lee, but also from Meg Bond, which is here with us, and from Caroline Evans from the University of Massachusetts Lowell in US, that are going to present a talk entitled Promoting Social Inclusion and Connectedness, Early Efforts to Combat Microaggressions. Thank you, Yang Ling, and please, if you can start in a moment.
Okay, so I'm going to start my presentation here. And give me one sec. Are you able to see my screen?
Not
Yeah.
now, but okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, so actually, I want to make a minor correction is that I'm now not in the US, I am in Taiwan because I have moved back to my country. So right now I am an assistant professor at Chaoyang University of Technology.
So we have
social work.
also we have also Asia today. Thank you again.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, yes. So this work is this research is conducted by me and Caroline and Meg. So we were so today I'm going to share my our work with you. So our study is so today I want to share with you our study. So we have known that allies can promote diversity, equality, and inclusion changes. But how do we make the best use of these people's energy? So our study is trying to see how intentional and systematic planning can help organizations harness the energy of these willing allies to support the changes. So we propose an approach that is peer-to-peer approach to address the change efforts. First, I want to provide a little bit background about our study. So this study actually is a part of a bigger 5-year US NSF advanced institutional transformation grant. So the overall study is to, so the overall goals of this big project are to disrupt microaggression, interpersonal and institutional microaggressions, establish innovative mentoring approaches, and promote equitable policies and procedures. So our study actually is under the first goal, disrupting microaggression. So we provide bystander training for faculty members. So unlike most of the training workshop, our approach is a peer-to-peer driven approach. So we ask faculty members to be the what we call equity leaders. And equity leaders were trained by 2 faculty members who are familiar with microaggressions and bystander intervention. Then they go out and facilitate the bystander training workshops, provide to the faculty members on our campus. So other than facilitating the workshops, equity leader also play other informal roles that we will talk about that later in this presentation. So who are these equity leaders? So in order to find these equity leaders, we first asked the dean and the department chairs to recommend faculty members they think suitable for this initiative. And mainly we are looking for faculty members who are informal opinion leaders in the department and who are passionate about DEI issues. And they can be senior or junior faculty members. Additionally, we recruit equity leaders from different disciplines and different social identity groups. Many equity leaders are not from social sciences, so we need to prepare them to facilitate the trainings. So what we do are we ask them to attend the weekly meetings. So after 1 semester, the meeting became bi-weekly meetings. We also prepare some readings for them, and we discuss these readings during our regular meetings. By doing so, we help equity leaders to learn about microaggressions, bystander intervention skills, and the theories supporting the knowledge. So we also ask equity leaders to observe their colleagues' daily interactions, to use these materials to design the bystander training workshops that are rooted in our campus. So one thing very important is that our example provided in the workshop is related to their daily lives. So here is overall timeline. So we started this preparation back in 2017 fall. and we start the meetings. And then our first official bystander training was in 2018 fall. So right now we have trained more than 300 faculty members, if I remember correctly. So based on the feedback we received from the workshop participants, in the 2019 fall, we start to design a second workshop addressing intersectional microaggressions, because we start with the gender-based microaggression and then we move to a more complex issues. So in terms of the result of the outcome of the workshop, we published another article about the efficacy of this workshop. So if anyone is interested, we can provide that article. However, my co-author and I also want to know how equity leaders perceive their roles and their responsibility and their overall experiences. And because we have spent a lot of time on this project, so we really want to know how they feel about this. So we apply a social ecological framework to develop our current study. So this framework includes 4 principles. First, change efforts are embedded in multiple levels of analysis, including individual, interpersonal, organization, and broader social dynamics. And second, the interdependent relations of the organization mean that a change in one unit can affect other units. Then we think that since individuals' life experience are different, so the impact of the change efforts on these individuals will be different. Last, this framework recognizes that individuals' different access to power and other resources. Some people have more power because of their position or their rank, but other people may have the informal power that can also be an asset to change the social norms. So our research questions are, how do equity leaders conceptualize their work, their role, and what are the radiating impacts? So how are equity leaders impacted by this role? And what are the challenges and how do equity leaders navigate them? So we conduct interview with equity leaders. So this is a relatively small group of people on the overall campus. We interview 3 men faculty and 5 women faculty. 3 of them are faculty of color. 2 are identified as LGBTQ individuals. And we have 3 full professors, 3 associate professors, and 2 associate teaching professors. Some of the faculty, when they first became equity leaders, they were assistant professor. Then during the process, they promote as the associate professor, which we are kind of proud of that. So first, we asked them, how do they conceptualize their role? So one equity leader thinks that reading and discussing research articles are very helpful for forming the role because they are not familiar with these materials. So they think that this is a very helpful process for them. And then another equity leaders mentioned that the process of discussing materials and developing the workshop materials is important, which equity leaders later will mention that this process, because they are the ones who create this material, so they feel more confident when they teach these materials. About the radiating impact, there are 2 examples here. One equity leader shared that people would just come to me asking about stuff, or there would be close meeting where issues would arise. So which means that equity leaders become the go-to person with that when their colleagues have the questions. And another equity leader finds that younger faculty are more willing to speak up because they feel that they have the support in the audience. Then we talk about the impact, because the impact is not just to their colleagues. There are some impact for the equity leaders themselves. So one equity leaders mentioned a personal gratification, a source of professional enjoyment. And another equity leaders mentioned that increase diversity in your mind and make it part of your own personal assessment when he or she sitting in the hiring committee. And because the equity leaders come from different disciplines, so they are very value the opportunity to work with faculty from different disciplines, which is a rare opportunity if you consider the university campus. That different discipline, especially like science, like the chemistry and psychology, they don't really have the opportunity can work together. So last, we talk about the navigating the challenges. So the two big challenges they mentioned is concern about whether they learn is enough. And if there are like a question raised in audience that they don't really know how to answer that. Another concern they have, the challenge is that there's a lot of time commitment to help them navigate the challenges. So we always have the pair to facilitate the workshop. So if one equity leader doesn't know how to answer the question, there's another person can help her. And ultimately it comes down, and we find that equity leaders have this kind of commitment that because this group of people, they are all willing to put the energy and time in this initiative. So kind of help each other to live up this commitment. So I think I spent too much time on this one. So the last one I want to share is some takeaway from our work. The first one is that we think the success of the equity leader initiative relies on a clear organizational structure that merges broader group goals, like our bigger goals, with the group's more interpersonal bottom-up approach. Then we think that there are different ways and activities that can influence department culture and organizational strategies. They can be formal or informal. Third, we think that it is important to utilize people's informal influence to enact changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ling. And I don't know if there are any questions from the attendees. Here we have the chat. I lost your screen. Okay, perfect. If, please, you could stop. Yeah. To show the screen. A very brief question from me, actually, because okay, I change. What do you think about this kind of approach to try to act directly on microaggressors, just instead of the dynamics of microaggression? No, so to impact of let's say on problematic people or problematic guys and girls, so making them trying to obtain a sort of win-win strategy to create an equity leader or a leader in general, but also to prevent possible these dynamics directly on those of the population more at risk. What do you think about it? It would sound?
So our idea is that to try by creating a more like friendly, that's an environment that people are more willing to talk, because we know that there are some people it is very, very, very hard to ask them to change their behavior. So we are hoping that this environment, that when somebody do something that is a little bit problematic, there are other people can step up and say something, and then it will help that transgressor. We say this as a transgressor, that we hope that this transgressor will be able to kind of like reflect on their behavior. And also in this workshop, we provide some strategies that can help the people who are hoping to step up. We have the strategy can help them, like talk to that transgressor later in a more private environment. So we are hoping to tap on this kind of interpersonal relation to help to solve the issue of microaggressions.
Perfect. I see. Just 1 minute for the question of Nicholas that wrote, that was a great presentation. Do the workshops involve the prevention of microaggressions between students as well as faculty? And have you been able to see changes from the perspectives of students and other members of the community? In 1 minute, if you can, Youngling.
Okay, so we start this program just focusing on faculty. Part of the reason is that this is an SF grant that we are hoping to start with from there. But we also receive a lot of feedback from the staff members and also students. So I believe, because right now I'm not associated with UMass, but I know that because we still have very close relationships. So I know that we are still working on developing a workshop for the grad students.
Great.
So Meg, if you want to chime in, please.
I know we don't have a lot of time. I was just going to suggest we can post links to like at least 3 articles that we've written about this that might be interesting. One that's a lot about the rationale. One is the article that Yunling just presented. And the other is the evaluation results. And we'd be happy to talk to people offline.
Yeah.
Thank you, Meg, also for the integration. Thank you, Youngling. Daniel,
Thank you.
say that in addition, you say the training was for bystanders. Was this just a way of reaching aggressors?
I think it's kind of both, because we know that faculty eventually will go back to their department and interact with these transgressors. So we are hoping that part of some of the strategy, we actually help the bystanders to reach out to the aggressor.
Great again. Thank you, everybody. And we have to go further now with Mary Luz Franco Ortiz from Puerto Rico and from the University of Puerto Rico, Cayey, I hope to pronounce it correctly, that is going to present a talk entitled Transforming Colorism and Racism in Elementary School Education in Puerto Rico. It sounds really interesting. Are you here, Mary Luz? Can you hear?
Yes, I am.
Perfect.
Yes, I am. I'm here.
So
Please let me know if you can see the presentation.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Perfect. Okay, you can present full
Perfect.
screen if you want. It would be cool.
Let's see. There, can you see it now?
Perfect. Great.
Perfect.
Start
Okay.
with one.
Well, thank you so much for having me here today. As you might know through the news, we have recently been struck by a Hurricane Fiona in Puerto Rico. So most of the archipelago we don't have electricity. And I've come to my job, which is an hour away from home because I don't have electricity at home, just like everyone. So I'm grateful for being here today. And but we are resilient. We are resilient just as our ancestors, African ancestors, were and have been throughout. Precisely yesterday, we commemorated El Grito de Lares, which was a call for freedom on behalf of the enslaved African ancestors here in Puerto Rico. And I'd like to acknowledge their building our cultural, political, and economic foundations for Puerto Rico throughout our history until the present times. So I will be sharing today on the subject of transforming colorism and racism in elementary school education in Puerto Rico. This is based on a research project that began in 2004, and that that initial phase concluded with this book that is called Arrancando Mitos de Raíz, or Pulling Out Myths from the Roots. It's a guide for an anti-racist pedagogy about African heritage in Puerto Rico. And it was published in 2013. It's intended to assist in educating teachers, university students, social workers, educational policy makers, psychologists, and generally anyone who's interested in transforming racism in Puerto Rico. This book is a result of an applied anthropology, social psychology, and interdisciplinary social science research project conducted here at the University of Puerto Rico in Calley. And our main objectives or the field research took place over, like I said, a 9-year period. We sought to answer whether institutional racism was embedded within school curricula at the elementary school level, and whether children who exhibited Black physical features were routinely exposed to racism and discrimination in schools. Our objectives of the project include fostering our prideness of African heritage, to promote positive attachment to Blackness and the African heritage among school-age children, to build a critical consciousness around the ways in which Blackness has been historically associated with inferiority and whiteness with superiority, and to help diminish the effects of racism among students, particularly from the institutional level. These are the researchers. At the interpersonal level, racial discrimination among students included rejection, humiliation, mockery, and even physical abuse of children who were evidently Black or exhibited Black physical features. There was widespread rejection of physical traits associated with Blackness, specifically as it related to hair, skin color, and lip shape. There were also clear gender dimensions associated with particular traits. For example, Black hair is a common target to ridicule girls, often called bad hair, while insults related to hypersexuality are common among boys. Sorry, just a second, please. Sorry about that. So consequently, we found that students who are victims of racism, emotional instability, anxiety, and isolation. Students often begin to experience racial discrimination at the elementary school level and continue to encounter racism throughout the entirety of their school experience. These ongoing aggressions lead to feelings of marginality, low self-stigma. We don't call it low self-esteem, we call it low self-stigma, because this is part of the social construction in society that is internalized. Dropping out of school, and even engaging in self-destructive behaviors such as taking drugs. Teachers, social workers, and parents reported during their interviews that other consequences of racism involved acting out, misbehaving, getting in trouble with school authorities, and ultimately getting expelled out of school. So there were different ways in which students internalize this racism. For instance, we asked students if they were able to change some aspect of themselves, what would they change? And for instance, one student said, I would like to change my eyes because I want to have green eyes, or the nose so that I can have a straight nose. So this is the way that racism is internalized. Some of the examples are here. So findings from the study revealed that racism is pervasive in schools. At the institutional level, we found that curricular materials and lessons taught students 5 recurrent and specific myths about Africa and African heritage and Blackness in Puerto Rico. These are 5 myths. There are more than 5 myths that reproduce racial hierarchy in the social studies curriculum, but we focused on these. First, that Africa is poor, primitive place of little importance in the world. Second, that slaves were passive victims of slavery. Third, that all Black persons in Puerto Rico were slaves prior to the abolition of slavery during the almost 400 years of slavery here in Puerto Rico. Fourth, the contributions of our African heritage are limited to music, to folklore, and to hard labor. So we're in the fifth myth is that in Puerto Rico, the majority of Black persons disappeared as a result of race mixing or mestizaje. So these are the 5 myths that we challenge throughout the text, and we bring about different alternatives. In terms of the analysis, aside where we have the theoretical framework from the social construction of race, and we analyze race and racism from that standpoint, but we also look into the consciousness in action, which is a model by Raúl Quiñones Rosado, a Puerto Rican psychologist, who offers a cohesive view of well-being and development in the context of oppression. Maintaining that institutional oppression is precisely the primary force that hinders integral well-being and development. It describes negative psychosocial and psychological impacts in the internalization of oppression. Quiñones Rosados presents consciousness in action as one that is vital to a praxis of liberation for well-being. Understanding the power of dynamics of current social identities such as race, culture, class, gender, sexuality, religion, and others is vital in the process to deep psycho-spiritual growth, social change, and development of human consciousness. So finally, we propose to decolonize academia by denouncing anti-Black racism and other forms of oppression, such as sexism and classism. Second, fostering pride about African heritage by promoting positive attachment to Blackness and the African heritage among school-aged children. Third, build a critical consciousness around the ways in which Blackness has historically been associated with inferiority and whiteness with superiority to help diminish the effects of racism among students. And fourth, enforce structural change throughout policies of inclusion. In conclusion, by analyzing historical influences of structural racism within curricula from the elementary school level and reviewing the curriculum to include African contributions from an anti-racist and decolonized perspective enables us to develop strategies to dismantle or unpack racism in the communities, in schools, and of course in academia as well. It is important to build networks and create a sense of community around these issues. In this journey, providing education opportunities in communities and younger generations of Black and African descent are an important investment. So we're saying that African heritage is rhythm, language, food, music, folk, spirituality, but also invention, creativity, adaptability, resistance, resilience, beauty, diversity, bridge, affirmation. And this is what we propose is basically to make structural change through the curriculum in education in Puerto Rico. We're now at another phase where we're working with the editors of the books that are used in schools so they can have a guideline, an anti-racist guideline, and develop material that is anti-racist. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Lutz. Very inspiring, interesting presentation, and congratulations.
Okay.
for this approach. Actually, you explained at least to me a lot of things I didn't know about Puerto Rico. And you know, it's actually it's US, even if not 1 century ago, maybe not. So it's a window on Puerto Rico, very nice window. I don't know if our colleagues have any question, and if you can do from the presentation.
Can I ask something?
Yes, please.
Sure.
I was wondering how this is accepted, whether it's like if there's resistance to this project or everyone is very happy about it.
There, at the initial phase during the first 9 years, there were open doors in all of the schools where we worked. Our main challenge was at the higher level, in the policy making level, which is really key because we could have stakeholders and people who are interested at the individual level, but in order to have a broader impact, we need to change the policy, and the Department of Education was not really an ally until recent times. Right now, we have an ally at the government who passed a law that fosters anti-racist education. So that has been key, as well as personnel at the Department of Education that have opened the door for us. And right now we're, I would say, at a greater stage where we can have the institutional impact that we want to have. I think that the changes come from bottom up. That's what has been happening, and there have been many interested people. We have made more than 200 workshops here in Puerto Rico during the past 3 years because the people are interested, but we need to have structural change, and that's where we're focusing right now. Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mariluz. Thank you, Daniel. I would suggest to go on, but eventually, or possibly to be back to this. Actually, I had just maybe an inspiring thing, because in these days, in the past days, we talked sometime about the possibility to transform the narratives in counter narratives. Maybe it could be also a tool, another tool for primary school as well, to ask to children to enlarge these small phrases, these small instances, trying to find an answer, a counter narrative, so a way to reverse the thing. We were slaves at the beginning, but before, for instance, we were the kings of the world, or something like that. It's an exercise, but
that's precisely what we propose through the book, is to counteract each of those myths with specific exercises and lessons.
Great. So.
That's precisely what we do. And for instance, there's the myth that all African ancestors were enslaved, when it's a myth, because throughout the almost 400 years of slavery in Puerto Rico, most African descendants were free. So that notion of liberation must be addressed in the books. We're not only enslaved, which is part of our history, but also the free, and how the Maroons, how they were able to get their freedom. And as you say, our history does not start with slavery. It starts with freedom. And that's part of the myths that we're working with. Thank you for the
you have another
comment.
question, so if you can in 1 minute to answer to Vic, that of course make you to thank you for the presentation, and ask, considering the gender differences in stereotypes, have you incorporated different methods to address that intersectionality?
Yes, particularly right now, what we're looking into is the texts that are being used in schools, And we're looking into the intersectionalities of race and gender, as well as gender, not only in the text, but also in the images, because in 4th grade is when our children are first taught about the mixture of races and ethnic groups here in Puerto Rico. And unfortunately, in 4th grade, many are still struggling with reading, the reading capabilities. So the images are really powerful. That's why our current project is called Visualizing Afro Dignity. And we're looking into the social studies text and precisely bringing out a guideline for the editorial so they can rewrite our history from an anti-racist perspective. We need to address and have new narratives. We're still a colony of the United States, which is part of the whole struggle and situation here in Puerto Rico. We have been a colony for the past 500 years. So in order to understand where we are right now, we need to understand our history from another narrative.
I agree.
From an anti-racist and decolonial narrative.
I agree perfectly, and thank you very much. Really fascinating from your job, and I'll try to follow your next steps. We have to continue now. Thank you again, Mary Luz, with Nicolas Villaroel, that together with Victoria Riveros from Australian National University, the Center for Heritage and Museum Studies, is going to present a talk entitled Latin American Solidarity from Latins in Australia. Power and networks of support in the construction of identities and communities. I don't know if the X is typos or not. So in the case, sorry, Nicolas, but I think not.
No, it's Latinx.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna present.
Sorry,
so
Victor.
yeah.
Sorry, Victor.
No worries. It's our both our presentations. So,
Nice to see you.
Okay, so I'm gonna share the PowerPoint. Can you see it? Yeah, perfect. I'm also gonna read a paper because otherwise I'm gonna talk for too long. So before starting our presentation on solidarity from the Latin American diaspora in Australia, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land from where I'm speaking to you. The 9Iccp people's sovereignty was never ceded. This was and always will be Aboriginal land. The Latin American diaspora in Australia is one of relevance because of its history and context of arrival to the country. We argue that understanding it can help us get a better grasp of the complex processes of diaspora, community building, as well as social and identity conflicts that emerge in the processes of migration. The Latin American diaspora in Australia is comparatively small to other groups that has thus been studied and has thus been understudied. Nevertheless, it's very rich in terms of diversity and complexity. The first recorded Latin Americans in Australia arrived in 1891, reaching around 0.49% of the Australian population in the 2011 census. It is difficult to estimate the actual number of Latin Americans in Australia because of the characteristics of the census, which, for example, only considers people that were born in Latin America, identifying second and third generations as Australians. Scholars have identified two main waves of migration from Latin America to Australia. A first wave came during the 70s and 80s, linked to the civic military dictatorships in Latin America, where the need for refuge was met with the push from the Australian government for new skilled workers. A second wave of Latin Americans arrived from the 90s onwards with a shift from refugees and reunited families, to students and economic migrants, which makes this second wave a highly educated group. The second wave faces its own challenges, like integrating themselves in the workspaces in Australia, but also based on the doctoral thesis with Chilean exiles in Australia from Nicolas Villarroel, my co-author. The new migrants experience tensions coming to establish Latino community with its own idiosyncrasies. Generational gaps, ideological shifts, and the conflict in between assimilation and cultural identification create tensions when it comes to legitimizing the experience and goals of new migrants and giving space to the historical experiences of the first wave. Considering this diverse context is that we started this research project wanting to understand the motivations of Latin Americans in Australia to engage in solidarity with their countries of origin. Our experiences in Australia have led us to recognize that for the Latin American community, the organization of networks of collaboration to help Latin America has been relevant in creating a common identity as diaspora, keeping a sense of continuity with their cultural practices and building social capital. We framed these actions under the umbrella of solidarity, which has been the framework used in the 70s by Latin Americans in Australia. We understand solidarity as the willingness to act and help people in times of need. Different studies show that people are more willing to help others when they perceive a shared or common identity with them, and that this is a social, cultural, and historical process that responds to the affective and ideological connections that create the fabric of communities and groups. Considering this, we asked ourselves, why do Latin Americans that live in Australia organize to help people in their home countries? Considering that migration often entails changes in identity, what are the motivations of Latin Americans to help people in their region of origin in times of need? With these antecedents, we offer some of our insights on solidarity and identity based on the results of our exploratory qualitative study that we're still conducting. We have done 12 interviews with people from 8 different countries of Latin America, engaged either in grassroots organizations centered around solidarity or individually supporting causes. We've interviewed people in projects that were active right before or during the pandemic, which means that a lot of the projects shift in one way or another to offer support in the face of the social and political injustices that the COVID pandemic made visible in the region. 3 of our interviewees came to Australia as part of the second wave of migration. 7 came as part of the first wave of migration, and 1 is a second generation Australian, Latinx in Australia. Despite sharing the general goal of helping Latin Americans, there are different repertoires and specific goals in their actions. The repertoires include actions to raise funds, like selling traditional food or organizing musical events, political support like political lobby in Australia, but also direct collaboration with organizations to offer their political insight, and finally, symbolic support, including actions to gain visibility for the causes like protests, and actions focused on showcasing international support like sending photos or videos and signing petitions. Although most organizations engage in some form of economic support with organizations in Latin America, the reasons why they do this differ. Thus, we identified 3 main goals: solving material needs of people in Latin America, community building within the diaspora, and conscientization. This last goal is usually directed towards an imaginary or not audience of mostly white Australians, and can be framed from an informational perspective, making people aware of the struggles in Latin America, or from a political awareness perspective, where the goal is for Australians to see that the struggles of the people around the world are similar. They are linked to structural issues like capitalism, racism, misogyny, or political corruption. With this general description, we can start to answer why Latin Americans in Australia organize themselves to help people in their home countries. We see that some of the reasons why they stay participating in grassroots organizations are the historical trajectory of their paths in Australia, their political affinity, and or shared identity and friendships. These experiences can be organized around the idea of belonging. Latin Americans find community in these organizations, but that's not the whole story. They also find meaning, a connection with their country of origin and family history, and a way to give continuity to their narratives as Latin Americans, despite the distance with their home countries. The motivations to engage in solidarity can help us to understand this connection with Latin America. We've identified three main sets of motivations: beneficiary-centered motivations, where their motivations depend on the perception of the people they help as being in need, which makes solidarity an ethical mandate. The internal drive motivations, or personality attributed motivations, connect with what they refer to an innate need to help related to emotional reactions, but also their identity as Latin Americans, in the sense that they could refer to a sense of collectiveness or interconnection as relevant cultural element of their identities. Finally, life history motivations include both experiences in their home countries and as migrants. The history in their home countries include experiences like family involvement in social and political action, a history of poverty and or state violence, and their experiences as migrants include in some cases the political exile, building social relationships with diaspora, and experiencing economic security, which urges the need to give back to their home countries. Now, with these results, we hope we've shed some light on why Latin Americans in Australia engage in solidarity with their countries of origin, and on the other hand, how solidarity is key to build community within the diaspora and to expand their relations with Australians. Solidarity relates to empowerment and enhances the agency of the diasporic communities, building a sense of power, but also the skills to interact with others and take control over their lives. Solidarity then is deeply connected with identity, yes, but also with agency and efficacy. These solidarity projects make our participants feel connected with their identity as Latin Americans, as they share ideas and preoccupations with those in their countries of origin, while also feeling useful. But these actions also change their identity, as culturally meaningful practices are modified in the exchange with other Latines, as well as the processes of making them available as products for Australians also change those practices. The diaspora also reconstructs their ideological framework as their contact with Australians' politics, but their connection with Latin America through solidarity allows them to do so while feeling anchored in current issues in Latin America. We know solidarity is more frequent when there's a perception of a shared identity. Latin Americans in Australia are active in their process of identification. By actively choosing to work with certain groups, like the working class, indigenous groups, or those in need, they construct spaces of socialization and exchange. This active identification happens in parallel with the construction of tight-knitted diasporic communities that feel relatively homogeneous and safe. And that's about it. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vic. Thank you for the good presentation. So there's someone, you're receiving some claps, some clappings. This is virtual clappings, but
yeah,
as well. And I don't know if some colleague want to make your question the moment someone has arrived. And of course, the question is a question that will always be what measurables would you search to assess actually the outcomes of projects like this?
I don't know if you want to, okay, I'll take it. In this case, this is not an intervention, but we are recognizing the agency of the diasporic communities and like what they are already doing. So it's basically an exploratory qualitative project that is not looking to properly measure, but to understand their experiences more in depth and to see how they see what they do and what's the impact that they have. But yeah, it will be interesting to think of measuring, but this is just a very small project. I'm gonna let Nicolas discuss.
I think that from a point of view, the qualitative analysis, the more parametric and quantitative approach existing, it's a different way to see. No? Qualitative analysis actually is about to build very complicated spaces with metrics that refer just to that should be created. So in general, yeah, I used impact in order to highlight maybe a wrong term, to evaluate the potential impact of this approach, not as intervention, you're right, but as a measurement. I'm really fascinated by the when someone proposes new model to investigate reality beyond the state of the art. And always I think that the effort, it would be a very precious an effort to define new measurables for the specific, following the specific idea. We need that instead of just, you know, the standard correlations or student t-test, or even, you know, the analysis, the textual analysis with the lab or Atlas or something like that, you know. That's a challenging a challenge of our discipline, I think. So maybe you didn't yet reflect on this, but I think it's a natural step in your job, and of course the most challenging one.
Yeah, no, yeah, I think that is like a really good suggestion and a really good, an interesting point. I also think that it also depends, I guess, on what we are looking to measure right now. Given that we are just, yeah, as Vic was saying, in this exploratory phase, I guess that one of the aspects that we could think to measure at some point is the, I don't know, like specifically stuff around sense of community, for example, among the diaspora, which could be interesting to evaluate or assess in terms of these actions of solidarity. And I'm also interested in one thing that I would like to assess at some point would be the impact on the communities that they, you know, engage with back in Latin America. We know that they mention like concrete stuff like, yeah, we I don't know, like we've donated something like, you know, food or whatever, or gave or raised money so that they could, you know, get whatever they wanted, they needed at that specific moment of crisis. But it will be interesting to also get to know more of the social impact or the community impact that these actions have in those communities.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Thank you very much. And please, Mary Luz, are you here? Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. I was wondering about the gender differences, if you could expand more on this, because I saw a quilt, and here in Puerto Rico, I also do community work in Colectivo Ile with women. And so we look to meet where the women are and their interests. And yes, we look into the traditional, say, practices, maybe in terms of our culture, and refocus it from an anti-racist perspective. So when I saw the quilt, it reminded me of the work that we do here as well with women. Were you able to see this?
Sorry, we're seeing who's answering. I don't think we see as many gender differences as we expected. There's one organization, for example, that is two organizations that are mostly women in our project, which is, it has to do too with this traditional role of caring, right? So it's like this idea that they are supposed to care about people and like be in an interconnected place within the community. So I think that probably influences a bit. But aside from like having these two groups that are like centered around women that receive help from their partners or things like that, I don't think we see like a difference in repertoires when it comes to who composes these groups. And I would say that the biggest difference is probably in between generations of arrival to Australia. Like people that arrived in the first wave tend to engage in actions more directed towards the diaspora and more collective because of this composition of being people that came fleeing the political violence in Latin America, whereas the second generation tends to focus in individual help, like directly trying to help with money or with posts on Instagram and things like that. But yeah, I can think of more gender differences than maybe these groups are mainly led by women, and yeah.
Thank you, Vic. And there's also a question from Dora that say, from your observation in the community, would you say solidarity increased political participation or more intentional collective engagement in community problems beyond the crisis?
I would say that depends on case to case, I would say, but in general, what we've seen in the community is that the people that tend to engage in solidarity usually stay connected with the community in a way that sometimes this translates into participating in community events or participating in, I mean, not necessarily like not always political, like political, but sometimes really like sharing a meal or organizing something that it's really about sharing and having friends. So connect, as Daniel was saying before. So yes, but of course it is usually much more intense when it's in critical moments, and that is that.
I'm not sure if you lost us both or only Nicolas.
Just the last two words, yeah.
Okay.
But we were
Yeah.
talking about political questions, so don't investigate.
Yeah.
Maybe no, I'm joking. Perfect, Nicolas. I think we all grabbed your answer. Thank you very much, Vic and Nicolas. Now we have a couple of videos for the last two contributions. We are going to have a few minutes of delay, but I think it worth to listen to your very nice considerations. The first is from Moises Ferreira and Joaquim Luis Coimbra from the Facultade de Psicologia e Ciências de Educação da Universidade do Porto. And the title is Working Throughout Digital Platforms Between a Glimpse of the Future and a Return to the Past. Enjoy this video, and then there is going to be the last.
Hello, everyone. I'm very glad for being here. My name is Moisés Ferreira. I am a PhD student at Faculty of Psychology of the University of Porto. My presentation is about platformized work. That's another way of saying work that is done through digital research I've conducted in Portugal with 20 platformized workers, and maybe for better understanding this research, I tried to share my screen with you. Sorry, let me just see if I can do this properly. Okay, I guess it's shared now. Yes, so the title of my presentation, as you know, is Working Through Digital Platforms Between a Glimpse of the Future and a Return to the Past. Maybe, I guess this sentence can be clearer at the end of this presentation. But first, the previous advice, when I'm referring to platform work during this presentation, I will be referring more precisely to work, platformized work that is done on location. For example, drivers work for Uber, Bolt, and other companies like this, and couriers working for delivery, Glovo, Uber Eats, and others. In these cases, the work is platformized because there is a digital intermediation between workers and clients, between demand and offer, but the work itself, it's done on location. So first question, Why study platformized work or platform work? Because, well, three main reasons. Because its prevalence, it's already very significant. For example, in Portugal, 11.5% workers said that at some point of their life, they had already worked through digital platforms, and 2.1% of Portuguese workers said that digital platforms were their main income. So it's already very significant, very prevalent. And the trend is to be even more prevalent in the future. There are many reasons for that, and the pandemic may be accelerating the growth of digital platform for very many reasons. Two of them are the changes in the consumption patterns and the way the companies themselves have platformized their offers to the clients. But the main reason to study the platform work is because platform work represents a new work organization. It's not a mere intermediation, digital intermediation between offer and demand. Is a new form to organize work. And more important than the app, it's the algorithm management itself, as we will see. So, a new work organization. And we know that no work organization is psychologically innocuous, so we try to know better the feature, the characteristics of this work organization and the consequences of this new work organization on the platform workers. To do this, we conducted a qualitative and exploratory investigation in Portugal. We interviewed 20 platform couriers and drivers. We gathered some information through administrators of WhatsApp groups, and we carry out a press review, a national press review, so a Portuguese press review on this subject. What are the main characteristics of this kind of work? Well, it has all the characteristics of a precarious work, because it's a precarious work. So we could find a safety, a certainty, and instability in this kind of work. But there are more specific or core features of platformization. I highlight three of them. The platform on this kind of work, the platform has total control over work conditions and organization. There are the platforms are those who define the rates to be paid to the workers, are those who define the commissions to be charged, are those who define the rules to be applied, are those who define the framework for sanctions. The platforms define every single condition of this work. So the conditions of work and the organization of work is totally defined by the platform, and workers have no control of their work and have no any kind of bargaining power. A second feature that we highlight is the information withdrawal and the algorithmic opacity. When an order is assigned to a courier, for example, this worker does not have the full information about the task he has to do. He doesn't know how much he will earn with this task. He don't know how many kilometers he has to cycle. For example, he doesn't know many information, and this information withdrawal has one major goal, is to oblige the workers to to accept all the tasks that are assigned. So they can't choose the ones that are better for them. They have to do all the tasks the platform demands. And a third core feature of platformization is the work atomization and social isolation. Because this is a kind of work where the competitiveness is harder, and we found no cooperation between workers. So these characteristics have obviously some consequences on the platform work and on workers. Some of those consequences are the psychological strain and mental health problems. Those aren't new. In fact, there is a vast literature that correlates the precariousness features with these kind of psychological issues, and they are maintained in the platform work. But more than this, we found difficulties to access to work psychological functions, such as time structuring, activity regularity, social relation broadening, identity construction, and development of the workers. The workers, they are disempowered and they lack control and autonomy, which is a consequence that is very prevalent on this kind of work. And to respond to the lack of information and to the lack of definition on how the algorithm works, many times the workers themselves, they develop some strategies, but many of them are self-exploiting or self-defeating. They tend to work more hours. They tend to do every tasks that are assigned. They tend to try to be faster on their assigned tasks. So they tend to develop self-exploiting strategies that for them, well, they don't result in any good consequences, but they are very useful to the companies because they do make more money like this. So what to do? As psychologists, we should continue to study, of course, and to know better this new kind of organization, but study and know better, that's not enough, that won't be enough. We must boost a scientific, social, and political intervention. The context in which platformized work is done must change in order to improve quality of work. And there are several things we can do to make this real. Some clues. We should demand algorithmic transparency, so the workers can regain some power on this work relationship. We should not allow an unilateral relationship between the platform and workers, and we should demand workers to have collective bargaining and bargaining power in these relationships. And more important than that, maybe, is to bring workers to the academy and making them participants and protagonists as well on future research and debates. So I hope this presentation could be helpful.
Okay, here we are, and now we will show the last video from Sofia Morandini, Mattia Zene, Andrea Ceschi, and Riccardo Sartori from the University of Verona in Italy, entitled Fostering Social Inclusion in the Berica and Scaligera Areas, a study on individuals' careers of fragilities. Here we are. Oh, Vic, we cannot hear you. Oh, okay, you were talking with Nicholas.
Hello, good morning, everyone. I am Sofia Martini. I am a PhD student at University of Verona. I'm really sorry not to be with you in attendance to enjoy the Congress, but due to unforeseen circumstances, I had to participate in online work. The presentation I'm telling you about today is entitled Fostering Social Inclusion in the Barica and Scaligera Areas, a study on individuals' careers or of fragilities, and is the result of a research conducted by me, by my doctoral student colleague Mattia Zena, and professors Andrea Ceschi and Carlo Sartori, both associate professors at University of Verona in the Department of Human Science. In addition, collaborated on this research the Veneto region, which is the funding institution, and several organizations involved in the social and labor inclusion of Veneto citizens on the territory, specifically those who are included in what are called fragile categories or protected categories. That is, we're talking about people with disability or careers of fragility, for example, women with dependent children, immigrants, needs, and others. Our research, which is aimed to explore how the social labor inclusion pathways of fragile individuals works, and is focused specifically on two areas in the Veneto region, the Barica area and the Scaligera area. Let's quickly go through what it's all about. This is a representation of Barica area, which consists of the city of Vicenza and its province, and it includes two districts, east and west. The west district is the one that you can see colored in yellow, and east in blue. Scaligera area is composed of 98 municipalities divided into 4 districts: Verona City, East, Lowland, and West. So, why did we choose to investigate the functioning and the modalities of services in the area that work for social and labor inclusion of fragile individuals? Well, first of all, because especially in the wake of the pandemic, the situation in Italy has changed. In fact, with the crisis in the labor market, the possibility of including oneself in the labor market and thus being able to sustain a decent social position is increasingly difficult, especially for vulnerable people. A second reason is that, in addition to the old and familiar fragilities with respect to which the institution of Scaligera and Barica area operates, which are minors, oldest, disabled citizens at risk of social marginalization, new fragilities are emerging today. A striking example are the so-called needs. They are young people aged 15 to 99 who are unemployed and not pursuing any education. Well, they, according to Istat data of 2021, with the pandemic, have increased considerably in Italy. We can see the general and specific aim of our research. The general aims are, first of all, to contribute to the strengthening of the network of public and private services in the territories in order to arrive at modeling a modality of intervention that was able to increase the network's responsiveness to individual at risk of exclusion. The second one was to investigate organizational models of services in relation to social innovation needs, issues of social and or labor inclusion of fragile individuals, and the definition of the territorial and community welfare models. The specific aims were to map the services offered by the network of institutions working in social work, and specifically in the job-based placement of fragile people, the identification of the strength and weakness of the job placement service, and at the end, a proposal of a more functional alternative model enabling more effective social and labor inclusion of fragile individuals. So to achieve the specific goal I just told you about, output, and BNC, we developed three instruments that allow us to collect both quantitative and qualitative data. Therefore, of course, the research method was mixed. The first instrument we developed was a self-report questionnaire that allowed us to collect information on the activities that institutions do to promote the social and labor inclusion of citizens. It consists of 25 items that explore the characteristics on the institution, the activities delivered by the institution, the collaboration with the partners, the job identification and analysis, the result, the analysis of job application, and finally the coaching and monitoring of the pathway. This questionnaire, this survey, was then accompanied by a second instrument that instead allowed us to collect qualitative data. This was a semi-structured interview administered by telephone, which allowed us to supplement information that may have been missing. The third instrument we developed was a completion scheme that allow us to collect more in-depth information related to the pathway to employment and re-employment of fragile people. This is, on the other hand, the first map related to the coordination of services and institutions on the Verica areas. As you can see, when a person asks for help to be placed in the labor market, 7 institutions intervene and initiate the placement pathway through 3 assessments that, if positive, will lead the person to receive orientation, training, and job placement interventions. As you can see from this map, the path is similar with respect to Scaligera area as well, with the only difference being that in this area, people can often apply spontaneously to take part in the social and employment placement project without going through institution in the first instance. In fact, institution in these cases only intervene later. Here we come to the results, which we obtained by integrating the qualitative data we collected through the 3 instruments. We got an overview of what are the areas to intervene on. We found, for example, that there are a difficulty in defining what the special needs for disadvantages are. We found a lack of common assessment tool. We found a lack of traceability of the pathway, the need of a greater sharing and the best practice and pathway issues, and the need for greater accessibility for input information, planning and design of achieved policy measures, for example. So, based on this area, we hypothesized some intervention. The first was to share instruments for systematic and continuous evaluation, especially we proposed to develop a shared tool for assessment of the needs and capabilities of fragile individuals in order to effectively guide planning and thus course process tracking. Secondly, we proposed the development of database open information sharing system in order to support collaboration among network actors and to make more information about goals and project evaluation. And finally, we think that it can be very important to plan a community of practice in order to develop recurring and systematic moment of confrontation among network actors in which to share and produce knowledge that can be implemented over time. We are at the end of the contribution, so thank you for your attention. It was a very pleasure to participate at this Congress, and I take this opportunity to thank the organizers.
Okay, I would say perfectly. Thank you everybody for this very amazing, inspiring, and nice session. I appreciated a lot of the participation. I'm very sorry that the available time for the questions, as usual, has been was really straight. But I think that we did a nice job, and I hope that the seeds that have been seeded during this workshop will, of course, will grow, and maybe we could be in touch in the future in order to be updated about all your very interesting and fascinating projects. So thank you again. Congratulations for all the presentation, and have a good, as usual, morning, night, evening, depending on your time. See you, everybody.
Thank you. See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Gracias.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Gracias. Bye bye.
Gracias a todos.